Hello and welcome to Gencon Games, a Legend of the Five Rings podcast funded by the Legend of the Five Rings Discord community Patreon.
This podcast will focus on the role-playing game stories and lore for Legend of the Five Rings.
I'm Korva.
I'm Kikita Kaori, and today we have both lots of news and a weighty topic to discuss, because we are going to continue our Celestial Realms series by discussing Meido, the Halls of the Dead.
Yes.
It's a complicated subject, so this might take a while, or we might split it into 2 episodes. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
First of all, though, I wanted to apologize to our audience. Our editor, Sebastian, or Seabass as he's known online, is no longer available to edit court games. So I'm kind of taken on the task of writing and editing this podcast. And I have a lot of other projects like Emerald Legacy and Fortune and Strife and a real life.
Yeah, one of those.
Because of that and the, until this week, lack of new content from FFG and other complications from real life, we haven't been able to make anything new for a long while. I know even our last episode had a long wait before it was put out. And this is a long wait. And we just aren't able to do it as frequently or as well as we have in the past.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation, which part of it might be changing, because part of it was just nothing was coming from FFG or Edge or anybody to do with Legend of the Five Rings. And that is, as you will discover in our new segment, that has rather suddenly changed. Mm-hmm. But we'll see what that does for the future.
We still hope to bring out new content often. We just can't do it on the sort of schedule that we were doing it before. So
no, unfortunately.
I'm sorry about that. I wanted to thank our Patreons who have continued to support us despite our waywardness, despite our problems. And they really serve to keep the community Discord itself going. Our Patreons pay for the editing for Fortune and Strife. And we also have a number of software subscriptions that we need to keep paying for to be able to keep editing, keep hosting. So we are grateful to anybody who does service our Patreon. We would love to stay in touch with you for anything that you have or want to discuss. We are happy to bring it up on the show. We're also happy to have you, our Patreons, as our guests if they should want to show up here.
Yeah.
We can always use guests. So think about that. That's something that we can do in the future. But thank you for hanging in with us, and I apologize for all the delays.
Yeah, we really are extremely grateful. So, so let's move on from that into the sudden deluge of news that has occurred. It really, honestly, in the past few days, it's just been slightly absurd. A few things we knew about for a while, which is Gencon, which is upcoming. There are going to be a couple of games being run by Edge, so 2 games from Edge. One is 5th edition. That's going to be The Lost Writer. A controversial author has gone missing while in the City of the Rich Frog. Your group has been sent to investigate her disappearance, but be warned, following her path may come at great cost. But conveniently nothing that can't be sorted out in 4 hours of role-playing.
Oh, there is that.
And meanwhile, in Adventures in Rokugan, we have Storm Eel's Rest, which was a free RPG Day release. But at the heart of Earthquake Fish Bay, an ancient horror attempts to be reborn. The Empire Emerald needs you, so take up your blade, pray to the spirits, and prepare to take on the storm.
Yep, I'm in both of these games at Gen Con, so I will bring back reports. In fact, actually, this Gen Con has more L5R content in it than
Yeah.
any Gen Con, I would say, in the last at least 5 years.
Mm.
They've got these two modules, the Edge is running. There are a couple of other independent game workshops groups that are running L5R modules. There's a collectible card game tournament, legacy tournament, kind of being hosted for charity. There's it's just a bunch of stuff, and now there's all these new announcements.
Yeah.
Stormeel's Rest was available on Free RPG Day, but unfortunately, I think that was the 27th of June, but it wasn't at my local store, so I wasn't able to get it. So I'll just have to find out. It may be available for download someday, so we'll see.
Yeah. And there's actually a whole new website, legendofthefiverings.com. This looks very pretty. And it's got a whole host of new content and plans for the future.
Yes, this was a hit that came in only the day before yesterday. We're recording today on the 28th, and they hit you with a whole bunch of new things coming out. They have a video on there of what they're describing. It includes a new line of full-size collectible statuettes characters from the FFG story, taking some of their artwork and turning it into collectible figures. They had one of Togashi Yakuni that looked pretty awesome. They have a set of upcoming novels that are going to be doing a whole new retelling of the Clan War story. I think it's based on what happened at the end of the FFG version of the Scorpion Clan coup that was told through the LCG card game and associated PDFs of stories, but I don't know for sure, so we'll have to learn more.
It's have to see what happens.
It's written by an established author, however, so we will see. There's at least 2 new board games coming out. One we've talked about before, On the River of Gold, which is a Euro-style game, Eurorails, I think, where you're a merchant on the River of Gold, which seems a very strange take on Rokugan, but, whatever.
I mean, the merchants are there as well.
Maybe you're not secretly Colot.
I suspect. Maybe it's actually secret Colot. But I think if you're going to do that kind of resource management game, you're either going to be looking at one single province, or if you're going to have people competing, I think the River of Gold is a fairly obvious kind of place. And it is nice to see occasionally a different sort of side
absolutely.
But slightly more what you'd expect is there's going to be a clan war game. And they seem to be implying that it's somewhere between a war game, but also maybe a bit of a role-playing experience as well. So it's so that's probably a bit more what we'd expect out of Legend of the Five Rings.
There is a very big hardback adventure module book for adventures in Rokugan called Tomb of Ichiban, which, if you knew old 5R, that was a first edition module way back when, so I'm sure it's some sort of interpretation of that, though it could also be an interpretation based on Evan's book Heart of Ichiban, which also takes place in the Tomb of Ichiban, so who knows. That's not current timeline. That would be sometime in the past.
Yes, I'm curious as to see whether the Ichiban novels, because you've got Heart of Ichiban's out and Soul of is going to be out soon. Are these the preliminaries to the adventure, or are they versions of the like you're going to be playing through the events of the novel, or are the events of the novel what set up the adventure? And that's I'm looking forward to seeing what that
events
is,
of the novel
how they
completely
relate.
unrelated, and it's just a different take on the whole thing.
Yes. Is it yeah. And when is this set in the great floating timeline, or timelines plural, because Adventures in Rokugan does seem to be a completely separate timeline. And the books are set before 1123 thus far. Yeah. So I'm really loads of questions to be answered, and it's really nice that we're going to get some of those.
And for those people who are disappointed that this is Adventures in Rokugan versus 5e, it's not really surprising. Adventures in Rokugan is for the big kind of action adventure dungeon crawl kind of game anyway, which this would naturally be.
Yeah. I mean, Tomb of Yuchiban, you're going to be exploring a tomb, and that just fits.
Doesn't mean
Adventures in Rokugan.
It doesn't mean you can't convert it. I mean, you can get it, and then you can convert it to 5e if you want.
Yes. Yeah. There's absolutely nothing stopping me doing that. So that looks to be a good fun thing. There's going to be an art book. I believe we've discussed that. We've seen it discussed around, and quite frankly, just someone says L5R art book, I think we'll all just go, yes.
There's some
yes,
lovely
please.
art. They did show a copy of it on a video, so it looks very pretty. And then, kind of stuck in the stinger of the announcements that they gave, they have a potential new video game or mobile style game. It's an auto battler, which is, my son loves playing those kinds of games, and I don't understand them at all, but that's okay. I can deal. Apparently, you're a crab commander in the Shadowlands, and you're dealing with fighting hordes of monsters.
Yeah, I think that's a very kind of understandable. You kind of if you're going to do a video game, that's a really obvious one. That's a really obvious kind of place in Rokugan to do it. Horrible evil hordes, and you have to fight them off.
Pretty much, yes. All of this said, we will probably end up discussing this and the results, or what we learned from Gencon, in our next episode. So there's some more announcements coming, so we can discuss this more in depth then, and maybe give some speculation on some different ways that Clan War might go if we have more information, and so on. But this is a lot of news for today, so you can always go to the website legendoftherealms.com and see for yourself what is out there.
So legendofthefiverings.com. It's really nice to have anything, honestly, after so long. Unfortunately, they didn't specify any RPG books other than
they didn't, which meant that the Scorpion and Unicorn novels are still in the air. Edge, get on it. But we'll find out. Maybe there will be more news coming up, because they did say that there was more news.
We hope, let's hope so.
But anyway, today we're going to talk about Meido and the afterlife.
Anyway, we are the realm of waiting. So now we're going to continue our Celestial Realms series discussing Meido, the realm of the dead. In actual Japanese folklore, the terms Yomi and Meido are often used kind of interchangeably. Yomi is in Legend of the Five Rings. It's part of Tengoku, part of heaven, and it's where the honored ancestors dwell. So we're going to have an upcoming episode on Tengoku, and so we'll discuss Yomi there. So we're going to be talking about Meido, which is the land of the dead, where the dead go to wait for judgment before they proceed to their next life.
Yes. So I want to make very clear that the description of Meido and Yomi in L5R don't
No.
reflect anybody's real life religious beliefs
Yeah.
about what the afterlife is
They're-
like. All right. But I'm going to talk about some real life religious beliefs about the afterlife practiced in Japan, because they are both sources of inspiration for this kind of amalgamum that is the L5R version, and they're going to flavor parts of people's behavior both towards death and you know, after death, what happens there, what's related to it, even if they aren't a direct translation. But I want to be real clear that Rokugan is different from this, and I'm just giving you this to kind of explain the roots of the stories and explain why things are different for Rokugan in real life.
It's perfectly fine for Rokugan to have its own separate thing. It's a made up world. It can have a made up afterlife and all that sort of stuff. But if we look into some of the inspirations, that can be things that you can add and things that can flavor your game if that's what you want to go with. But obviously,
right. I don't recommend ever directly saying this is Shinto, this is Confucian, this is Taoism, this is Buddhism. That's not right. But when you have characters, especially alive characters who don't know the afterlife, and you're trying to express how they feel about the afterlife, that's where these things kind of flavor the experience of it. So these are all types of ways that your characters might view, while they are alive, the afterlife, because you have got to bet that only a very, very tiny percentage of the population ever actually went to Meido and returned, or talked to anybody who experienced Meido. And it's perfectly possible, even in a world where the gods throw rocks at atheists, to have people who don't believe any of this, or believe in a very vague way, or have different approaches. So we're going to talk about that as well. First of all, belief in the afterlife in Japan varied and does still vary greatly from region to region, within specific families, and just it's not uniform. This is the Japanese view of the afterlife. Even more so, it's because Japan is an amalgamation of many different religious influence at play, and how your particular family mix works then is going to flavor how you look at the afterlife and how your family looks at the afterlife. The major religions that color the Japanese view historically in different ways were Shinto, Confucianism, Taoism, and most strongly Buddhism. Because Shinto and Confucianism and Taoism don't really care where spirits go after they die or what they do in the afterlife. That's not a priority for them. And there's not really a sense of judgment about your life. The afterlife isn't there to be a judgment for you on your successes or failures in life or anything like that. But all of these religions are more focused on what do you do as a living person to care for these people you love when they're no longer there to actually take care of. And so that's what these religions all kind of focus on. So we'll talk about each of those first.
So in what you might call pure Shinto belief, if you're just looking at Shinto beliefs, after a person dies, their kami, their spirit, their human spirit, goes to live in another world. It's much like our world, but it's made for spirits, and spirits can pass between these other worlds fairly freely, and especially on special feast days. So that's their view,
right? Like the Oban Festival.
Yes. So
they might come visit you, and pure Shinto, or like just core Shinto, is a world is very filled with ghosts, because ghosts can pass back and forth between these worlds easily.
And those, there are spirits like other spirits, and you can treat them and deal with them and so forth, and maybe feed them and stuff, and that's how that works.
Right. Confucianism it doesn't care where the spirits go. They obviously go someplace, so they go. Confucianism is all about expressing your duties and fulfilling your role in life. And so it doesn't matter where they go. Your job is to pay filial duty to them. So you are the son and daughter, your father or mother has died, you still have a duty to them even after they have died as their child, that you must fulfill your role. It's all very about filling your role. And respecting your ancestors is one of your roles as descendants. So if you are a descendant, you do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Theoretically, if you are an ancestor, you do these things, which involve bringing blessings to your family. But to respect your ancestors, the important thing is that you do all the correct rituals. So if you do all the correct rituals in the right way, you are fulfilling your filial duty, and that's what counts. Everyone should do their filial duty. So the sense that the ancestors are looking after you because they're obviously going to fulfill their duty, because they're good Confucianists too, is there, but on the other hand, you can't tell if they are or not. So
Taoism, meanwhile, is very focused on the natural world and being part of the natural world and following the way, which is also part of just nature and how things should be. So death is part of life. It can be avoided indefinitely if the proper spirits of the body are nurtured and guarded. But death does happen. And if it does happen, it's a release from the corpse. It's a transformation from one thing to an unknown other thing. But knowing what you become after death is not necessary for living, because it's more about the natural world and who you are within it. What happens after is what happens after.
Yes. I dreamed I was a butterfly who was dreaming of being a man. That they're all cyclical. That's a very Taoist story. So it's not until you get to Buddhism that you really introduce the idea of an ongoing afterlife, after death of some sort, that is based around this idea of judgment or karma, or an evaluation of your current life. And going on to it. This focus on your next life is very Indo-European, and Buddhism is brought from India. And it's this idea of what happens after death is a very foundational part of Buddhist philosophy. Life is ephemeral and temporary. So it's very much thinking about the afterlife, as opposed to all the other ones who who cares? Death is natural for Buddhism, but after death, the spirit lingers until it is reborn into a new life. And the nature of that new life will be determined by the karma, good or bad, you have accumulated in your current life, and that is done by your actions.
Yeah.
Now, in Buddhist scripture, karma can determine whether that soul, your soul, can be reborn on earth as another creature or another person, or if you have enough good karma, you could be reborn in a heaven, or enough bad karma, it would be reborn in a hell.
Yeah.
That's what they call it, a hell. And heavens and hells are temporary.
Yes.
Your spirit only lives there long enough to get your karma to a neutralish kind of state, to then go back and you be reincarnated into another life. It's not like eternal heaven.
Yeah.
So if you went to a heaven or a hell to look for a specific ancestor, even if you could figure out where they were, it would, that person could already be reborn again.
Yeah.
Everybody gets reborn again eventually.
Yes.
Karma is judged in some types of Buddhism by the self. Basically, you evaluate at your moment of death whether you have good or bad karma, and then you kind of move yourself into the proper realm. And in some kinds of Buddhism, there is an external judge who's doing the judging. It is important to note that in Buddhism, because yourself is doing part of the judging, how you are at the moment of your death, whether you're calm and accepting of your life as it was, or if you're agitated and incriminating or stuff like that, plays a significant factor on how your approach goes into the next life. So even if you've done wrong things, if you're chill with it,
yes,
at the moment of death, then you could go into a better life anyway. So this really introduces that element, that the monks have about, and all the samurai have about being serene at the moment of death, being calm and in control and accepting of who you are and what your life has been. So in whether it's in L5R, but it's also in a lot of samurai stuff. The idea you're supposed to be serene at the moment of death is important, and also the whole nobody's supposed to be incredibly mourning or making a bunch of noise and strife for your departure when you die is also important, because that might make you feel distressed while you're making that decision, and that's not a good thing. That might lead you to a worse afterlife than you would have gone if everyone was calm and let you make that decision peacefully.
Yeah. And I mean, the ultimate goal, at least according to Buddhism, and to an extent Shintoism in L5R, but in Buddhism, is you're wanting to separate yourself from that cycle of death and rebirth. And that is at least part of what enlightenment is. You are no longer subject to continually being born into existence and thus suffering, and then dying and getting reborn and so on. And that's kind of the ultimate goal. Now, there is one of the common kind of Buddhist-focused amalgamations of a Japanese view of the afterlife, and this is one of the things that actually comes through in the common ceremonies you do after someone has died, is that after you die, after a certain amount of confusion after death, you start the trip to Meido. You don't go there immediately. There's actually a trip to it, and it can take a number of days. And there is a series of judgments that you come across as you are judged by a series of celestial judges. And so, yeah, you'll wake up after a few days. You're alone in the dark. And you travel to Meido down a long mountainous road. You reach the Sanzu River of red spider lilies. But before you can cross into the afterlife, you are judged by each of the kings of the dead in turn. And the Lord of the Dead assigns your next life.
Mm-hmm.
And there is these happen actually at set intervals after your death. And one of the things that is like your family or whoever will do rituals and pray for you every 7 days until you are judged by on the 30 on the 49th day, I think, and then there's 100th day, and then the first year and the second year, and so forth. So there are specific rituals to do for each of those judgments to hopefully help you along your way, and let them maybe overlook one or two things you did. Hopefully.
Now that said, that's one amalgamation, but as we said at the beginning, no religion of Japan or China or so on matches the Rokugani afterlife. But hopefully you see some of these elements in how Rokugani treat death in the lore.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, the primary source for a lot of the mythology we have of Japan in some of the early days comes from a book called the Kokiji, which is a Japanese chronicle of myths and legends and oral traditions rather than religious beliefs. Okay?
Yeah.
These traditions were brought together generally to justify the Yamato emperor's right to rule. And it was written around 711, 712. So it's very, very ancient work, but it kind of captures the religious beliefs of the time. Now, we've discussed what is in there, which is the creation myth from the Kokiji, which is about Izanami and Izanagi. And that has our first reference to what they call in that Yomi, the land of the dead. So just to remind you, though, we've said this before, when Izanami dies in childbirth, Izanagi, these are the first two gods, goes to Yomi to find her. But she asked to stay and asked permission to leave and was following her. He turned back and lit a torch to look at her while she was asking permission to leave. And when he lit a torch, he saw that she was a rotted corpse because she was dead. He was horrified. He ran away. He sealed the entrance to Yomi with a great stone and then washed the contamination of Yomi, the contamination of death from his body. The contamination combined with the river that he was washing in to create the first three gods, including Amaterasu, the sun, and their descendants, the descendants of those first three gods, which are humanity. So humanity is a mix of the contamination of the afterlife with the purity of the real world, of the world. So, one of the things that always is funny to me is that people complain about in L5R how similar the L5R creation myth is to Greek legend. But the story of Izanami and going to the afterworld and death to find his wife, to find Izanagi, has a lot of similarities to the Greek legends of Orpheus. And they,
Yeah, it's an
right,
interesting,
and
yeah.
there probably was some kind of communication in the ancient world that ended up causing these two stories to kind of emerge. So the Greek legend of Orpheus is only one Greek legend, obviously, and the L5R
Yeah.
creation myth is another, but they're not so completely foreign to each other as you might think in terms of Greek legends and I don't know, the view of the world. However, in the Kokiji, in this book, Yomi is really still very vaguely defined. It's full of corruption, so that's where you get this Shinseist, or not Shinseist, this Shintoist view of
Yeah.
death being corrupt or defiling.
Yes.
But it's still not a full
And
Meido realm.
no. Meido, as described in L5R, seems to be taken more from Diyu, which is a Chinese term. And I think the kanji for Meido and Diyu
Yes,
are
they
fairly
are.
similar. But that's the realm of the dead from Chinese mythology. So Diyu, it's a subterranean maze of different levels and chambers, and split into 10 courts of hell, although the exact numbers vary by story, depending on who you're asking. And they're each ruled by a judge, and they're known collectively as the 10 Yama kings, and each court deals with a different kind of sin or vice. The Yama is a Buddhist entity from the Theravada Buddhism, and they judge a character of a spirit and they send them into an appropriate rebirth. So a spirit could end up spending time in a heaven or in a hell before their rebirth.
Right. So the
Depending.
stories of King Yan or Yanlo Wang, are from an older Chinese mythology than Buddhism in China. They're like older fairy tales, but they ended up getting wrapped up into these stories of Yama from Theravada Buddhism, and then eventually you get this idea that King Yan is Yama, and he runs these multiple courts, and each are ruled by a Yan king or Yama king, who weighed the souls before them for him to basically take some of the work off of his load. So Yan was sometimes even considered just a position. A king Yan or the overall king Yan was considered just a celestial position, and a mortal could become king Yan. Assuming they were holy enough. They even had people who were mortals who the stories at the time said, and during the night he goes and does judging of the dead as Yan. So a mortal could assume the role of King Yan in this Chinese celestial hierarchy. These stories are shifted and changed a lot because they were each kind of rewritten in service of whoever was ruling China at the time. So the Tang dynasty might have one version, and a later dynasty might have another version, and they were written in service of that dynasty to make that dynasty's justify their decisions or make them work best for them. So that's kind of the official story changes with the dynasty. But these Chinese stories migrated to Japan. Okay? And in Japan, King Yan was called Enma, Enma, Enma. Albeit it was a kanji. Now, it wasn't pronounced like, letters. But that King Enma is also Enma-O. O is the title. His realm was Yomi, or Meido in different interpretations, not our L5R thing. And it is bounded by the Sanzu River, which we talked about later, the River of the Dead. And then later interpretations, like modern interpretations, make it not quite so gory and like a more metaphysical, river of spider lilies and more beautiful afterlife than this ancient stuff. So so that's kind of the background for the stories and folklore that kind of fed into the creation of Meido as it stands in L5R. Plus, we talked about real life religious inspirations of it. So hopefully that gives a sense of that, so we can talk about really what's in Meido.
Yeah, this is kind of like, what does Legend of the Five Rings describe? So this is Rokugan's version of the afterlife at this point. So that's what we're going to look into now. You start with Enmao, the inhabitants of Meido. No, let's start that again. So we'll start with the inhabitants of Meido, the people you would find there. And you have Enmao, which is the fortune of death, who reclaimed Meido from Jigoku, so is now in charge.
With Enmao is the 9 kings of hell, which are his adjudicants or judges. They are loyal and help Enmao. They helped him win Meido back from Jikoku when Jikoku leaked in to attack the other realms. These kings of the Jed do some of the judging and take the workload off of Enmao, but he's the guy in charge. The names in L5R they've given them are Shinko, Soko, Sosha, Gokan, Benjo, Teisen, Toshi, Byodo, and Tenrin. Now these are real terms. These are used for the kings of the dead in the real world too. So just for those who are sensitive to such things, it's worth knowing that some of this comes from are used modern. So this would be like a characterization of Saint Peter. The kings of hell, however, can have... if you're going to do something drastic with one, and this is a concern, change the name of one of them. That might be a good idea. The kings of hell can have all different personalities, even if they agree with each other. So their personalities can be unique to what a GM needs. Though if you're going to make them radically different, like I said, you might want to change the name.
Most versions, they each have a court for a different sin.
Right,
or something
the way
like
that it's written for L5R, they would... it's more like, I'm going to take the next person, and like distributing all of the personalities between the different judges so that MO doesn't have them all lined up to him. Otherwise, you're increasing the workload by 9 for no less time.
So you will also have the Mazoku, who are demons who serve the fortunes to work off bad karma. And they are playable in Adventures in Rokugan, which is kind of fun. So they are, in many ways, they're kind of the same as the Oni. It's just that they're
they tend to
on the side of the fortunes.
They tend to look like, at least
as opposed to the
in
side
the
of
afterlife, they tend to look like, big blue and red. Must be blue and red. Oni with giants with horns, kind of Oni, as opposed to gibbering monsters, kind of Oni, which L5R also does.
Yeah. I can imagine there's like one or two kind of working in the back rooms and kind of like not available to the public. No, I'm sorry, I just looked like this, but I'm just doing my job.
Yes, it could be quite creative. So there's also the Muen Bo Toke, who are people who were alive, but they were forgotten by everybody before they were judged. So they they can't really go on to their next life. So they often get assigned, they're just hanging around in Meido for no reason. So they often get assigned administrative tasks in Meido. These are like the souls of the living. And they hope to become Shingami. And Shingami are MO's mortal servants. So they hope to go back into life being a servant for MO. If they work really hard and are very good, they'll get that promotion.
Yeah. You will also, as you probably shouldn't be too surprised, that you will also find the spirits of the dead. They are on the same journey. They are, waiting to be judged. In the L5R depiction of Meido, they are often forming long lines waiting for judgment.
In addition, in L5R, there is Ryoshin. Ryoshin was the 10th kami, a child of the sun and moon, the same way that Akodo and Hante and Doji and Hida and Bayushi and all the other kami were. However, he died before Hante rescued him. And therefore, instead of going to Ningendo, going to Earth, he went to Meido. He is his own self. And when MO freed Meido from Jikoku, he realized that Ryoshin, the 10th kami, could be an ally to him. And he asked Ryoshin to guard the boundary between Jigoku and Meido. Now, Ryoshin is different from the other kami because he is neutral towards humanity. He was never alive. He never really met human beings. He doesn't favor them or disfavor them. So he is a target for Fulang to potentially persuade to his side. He doesn't have that bond with humans that the other kami do. Other beings to find out there. Craig's still going. I don't know why he keeps beeping. So it's basically it's reconnecting. It's disconnecting and reconnecting. The message I get within a second. So that's what's happening. So we'll just keep going and hope it works.
Yeah. Now, you may also find people who aren't actually originally from Meido, invaders, basically. There may be invaders from Jigoku or Toshigoku or Gakido. They might be actually attacking, or they may be infiltrators trying to sneak in to corrupt the servants of MO, cause chaos, or retrieve someone that they consider to be their own. Someone they think might be in danger of reincarnating into a nicer afterlife. They think, no, you're one of us.
Right.
You may have to deal with those if you ever find yourself in Meido.
That's kind of who's there in Meido, which is in some ways more important if you go by just the book description of what Meido is like, because in the books, Meido is depicted as a place filled with thick fog, featureless plains and rocky hills fading into endless gray, and in some, it's also described as kind of a desaturated or black and white version of Ningendo, but without life. So we do have a couple of places described in the book version, which is the queue, which is a very, very long line of people stretched across that barren landscape. And Emo's estate, which is a kind of grand court where all of the judging is done, and this river of blood, which borders Meido and Toshigoku, and potentially other realms. It's sometimes crossed by the Fortune Jizo, who has a little ferry to bring spirits over. But that's all we've got, which is not a very complex, fun place to adventure in.
Yeah. No, and I can get that there might be a reason why the realm of the dead, as in the part you go to before you go to your afterlife, might not be the most interesting
you can expand
tourist destination.
And what I wanted to do was share. There's a novel called Reflections, and it's actually kind of in the Disney Twisted Stories series. It's called Reflections. It's by Elizabeth Lim, and this is about, has the character of Mulan in it. But what I loved about it when I stumbled across it, has a very large, very coherent, and interesting geography for Meido. A Meido like Underworld, very similar to L5R, based on the Chinese hells. I have taken these areas and kind of written them up to give you some places in Meido that your characters can adventure in and interact with if you happen to go there, because I thought that the story was really good for presenting an interesting place to adventure in. So I'm not talking L5R as it's written purely in the books, but this is great stuff to integrate. So I hope you don't mind if I take this excursion into expanding Meido as a place to go. Okay? And Kovar will help me read off some of these so that you can, and we'll talk about them. Okay. The first place is called the Bridge of Helplessness. And this is an almost infinitely long bridge which holds the queue of souls waiting to be judged. And it crosses over the River of Blood that leads to Jikoku. The River of Blood flows there. It's filled with demons. You do not want to fall in. Nice thing about having your queue on a long bridge is it makes it hard to get out of the queue. You have to kind of urge your way forward. You're not going to just wander off in a different direction, at least till you get across the bridge. So that gives you your queue. So that was one feature of this expanded Meido verse.
Yeah. There's the Garden of Forgetfulness. The Lady of Forgetfulness, one of the Mazoku, will serve tea to the judged, and that will make them forget their previous life, which will help them be reborn anew. And she likes to invite visitors who aren't following the rules into her garden for tea, so they'll forget their mission and thus behave more properly.
Right.
And if necessary, she will insist.
The Lady of Forgetfulness can assume any disguise, can appear as anyone, from your dear grandmother to a fox to something terrifying. But the goal is she wants to trick you into drinking her tea, because if you drink her tea, then you'll behave like a good spirit of Meido and go stand in line and act like you're supposed to do in Meido, which is not running around being troublesome. So that's the idea, that eating or drinking makes you stay in the afterlife. Goes all the way back to the creation story there with Inazami and Igazani that we talked about. Anyway, so definitely something good to have, and it performs a
Yeah.
important role. You don't normally remember your past lives after you are reincarnated. So the next spot that you can have is called the Tower of the Last Glance, or the Tower of the Last Glance to Home. And this is a tall tower of scarlet and emerald, which holds the spirits of those who are worthy, especially those worthy of ascending to Yomi in Sengoku, or at least to a higher future life. So spirits who have been judged that will rest there and contemplate their lives in preparation for advancement. And there's a couple of interesting things here, because you don't necessarily have to be all the way dead to be here. So if there was a great hero who did deeds so valiant, or an emperor, somebody really, really special, they might get an instant pass to the front of the line, right? Everyone makes way for the emperor, for example, or someone really important. They might be judged very quickly because obviously their life was so virtuous, and go straight here. But if they are so virtuous, that could happen before they're all the way dead. So you might end up having to go here to find the soul of a very important, heroic, virtuous person, to say, and somehow persuade them to come back the normal way. So I thought that was kind of an interesting feature that they could have, especially for the heroic types. Also, somebody who was going to escape the cycle of reincarnation completely might be here meditating, doing their final meditations before they allow themselves to depart, disperse.
Slightly less pleasant location, the Hill of Swords, which is a mountain which is completely covered in blades, which are stuck into the ground just everywhere. The blades belong to bandits and ruffians, and those who reveled in bloodshed, while so they're stored here while the owner's spirits await judgment, potentially to reclaim them to go on to Jigoku or Toshigoku, which seems fairly likely. It is, unsurprisingly, somewhat dangerous to climb, and if you're not careful and quiet, the sword's owners may come and see who is interfering with their blades. The swords apparently do not cut ghosts like they do mortals who strayed into Meido.
Right.
So
now,
you
in
probably
the geography,
want a really good reason
this posits for Meido.
Heading up this particular mountain.
Up is towards life, right? And that's true for most versions of afterlife. Up is towards life. So this is a mountain. So it's getting in the right direction. But it's very dangerous to climb up, and since these swords will cut you, but not cut the ghost, you could end up fleeing through through a field of really sharp swords, trying to escape the owners. Might not like that. a difficult path to get out of get towards the end of the afterlife. Another place in Meido is a city of the dead.
Yeah.
And I've seen descriptions sort of like this from in L5R as well, which is basically a full city filled with ancestor spirits, just like any busy city in Rokugan. The spirits who are here are your ancestors, but not necessarily the most noble of spirits who ascended to Yomi in the afterlife, but not necessarily the worst spirits of your ancestors who may have gone to one of the worse afterlives like Toshikoku or Gakido or Jikoku. Basically, they've been judged. They're not due to be reincarnated for a while. And so they're just living here hanging out, waiting for their reincarnation time slot to happen. Because you don't instantly get reincarnated unless you're like special. You could be ending up hanging out here for a while, waiting your turn. Interesting thing is, your family's relatives who weren't the greatest and weren't the worst are probably somewhere in this city, hanging out, living a life much like they would have lived in the real world. They should always be willing to help you. So you've got some allies in Meido, potentially, of your own ancestors, right? But they also have their own desires and demands of you in return. These aren't necessarily the, like I said, the most selfless ones. So this is what, they might be being peddlers or merchants or gamblers, everything in this city. The money used in the City of the Dead is the script that is burned with bodies during the funerals. So that's their trade goods in the City of the Dead. So that's part of why you keep remembering them and stuff. You're basically paying them. During life to, so that they can have a good living in the afterlife in the City of the Dead while they wait for their reincarnation.
One of the places you don't want to end up, instead of going to the City of the Dead, is the Cauldron of Consequence. It's a giant boiling cauldron overseen by a huge Mazoku, the Lord of Flames. And that's where the spirits of those who particularly enraged MO are sent for punishment. So this isn't like, this is now your afterlife. This is, right, you've annoyed me. While you're waiting to see where you go, you're getting into the cauldron. So he's still going to be impartial because he's a judge.
So yeah, you're boiled alive and
but he doesn't have to make your time.
Your spirit is boiled in a giant cauldron
his realm particularly nice
for as long as he decides to to wait until he makes your decision of you.
Yes. So So it may depend on what you've done in life, or if you've done anything in the afterlife that particularly offend MO, right. He might decide to make your stay a little less pleasant.
So
watch
basically
your manners.
Where the souls of the dead then would receive the final decision on their destiny. In Rokugan, a courtyard outside is where regular judgments of guilt or innocence are made. So there's a courtyard in Meido where these decisions are made, or the sentences read. Anyway, it might not be where you argue your case, but that's where you get the final decisions. So that's if you're going out the official way.
Yeah. No, but there is at least one unofficial way, which is the Hall of Mirrors. That's a hidden back door out of Meido. And if you're able to confront your darkest self and prove yourself worthy, you may be able to free yourself from Meido without MO's judgment.
First you have to find it.
But I suspect it's not
obvious.
that easy.
It's in some secret
everyone would be doing
GM-determined location in Meido, and then you might have some series of trials to get there, and then you obviously the one you have to confront the most is yourself, and in some ways this is a backdoor that those who have reached a sense of inner peace with all of their lives have can potentially find, because if you are completely at peace with who you are and what you have done, you can look yourself in the Hall of Mirrors, look yourself in the eye. Then that's kind of how you would get out. You the same way as you would if you had reached enlightenment. Does that make sense? So those are some things you can add to your Meido. As I said, they're not in the books,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like I said, this story really had some really good stuff that I was like, I've got to include that in my Meido, so now you get it too.
Yeah. So you may be wondering, the cauldron of consequence sounds lovely. How do I get there? Or maybe it's the other bits you like. We're role-playing game players. This is what we do. Like, how do we get to the interesting place? Right? It's all very well knowing about it, but how do we have a story set there? So how might you get to Meido? The obvious one, it's kind of in the bit of a hint. It's called the realm of the dead. So
hold on a second.
option one is die. I realize it's probably not everyone's preferred method, but there's actually the wheel of.
What is?
Yeah, I thought I heard something.
Hang on.
No problem.
Okay, I apologize. Sorry about that. I got a phone call. It's on my headphones. Are you still there? Okay. So hopefully they don't do that again. And I couldn't find my phone just to hang them off. All right. Could you just start the obvious way, Die? You don't have to do all of the preamble, but when I started rambling off.
Yeah. So the obvious way to get to Meido, as you may guess from it being the realm of the dead, is to die. Which might not be your preferred method, but hey. There's actually a whole adventure module, the Wheel of Judgment, that's literally where it starts. So there are some possibilities, like you died, but you have a mission that's so important you need to bypass the whole judgment process. Or possibly you are selected because you are extraordinary individuals. You are selected to bypass the normal procedure
is that you
to
could
continue your mission or to be given a new mission. So that might be one way of getting into Meido.
Maybe a dead person is lost in Meido or must be rescued from them, and you, the party, are sent to a gateway to find them. Or even though it's extremely unlikely, you could stumble across one. Gateways to Meido in folklore would be found in the very bottom of extremely deep caves. And usually they're very well guarded by Mozoku guards. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Mozoku guards are that bright. So they could be tricked. These aren't the elite Mozoku guards. They're just guarding random bottoms of extremely dark caves. You could be teleported there or sent there by somebody. Or you could be, if you ended up in some scenario where you are lost or washed, going down an underground river, deep underground, and you are forced to navigate through Meido to get out of the cave because you're lost underground, and that would be terrifying, and you'd rather go through Meido. And right. Than keep wandering around in the dark. So that's another way you could find a gateway to Meido.
Or maybe there's no other option, depending. Yeah. It's possible you could be taken there by a powerful Kitsu Shugenja or a particularly human-oriented spirit, because they would have to be concerned with life and death, and a lot of nature spirits aren't that fast. It's possible that a corrupt or insane Kitsu sends the party to Meido while they make their escape, as opposed to just doing a standard kill everyone spell. They kind of do it. This will send you to Meido and get you out of my hair while I run away. But it could also be that if you need to get to Meido for whatever reason, a benevolent Kitsu Shugenja might be the one to send you there. It may be things like sharing a last farewell with a loved one before they forget everything, or any number of reasons. So if you needed to
drawn
go
there or pulled into Meido
Eikichi
by
Shugenja
a
might be the way
powerful, especially a
to get
powerful Shigenja ancestor. An ancestor spirit normally wouldn't have power in Meido, but all rules are out once you start talking about things like Ishinkin in the afterlife. I mean, just things get funky, and maybe an ancestor of one of the party members might pull them there. Or if a powerful Shigenja had known before his or her death that their future or their rebirth is in doubt, they were worried about the state of their soul, they may have left something for an unsuspecting samurai that would activate when touched or acted upon, that would draw that samurai or group of samurai to Meido and bring that item with them to give it to them, so then they'll have their special tool, whatever it is, in the afterlife.
Yeah.
Or they could summon them into the afterlife using, this thing that they left behind to force summoned samurai to undertake some kind of mission for them within Meido in order to be allowed to go back. So the Shigenja themselves is in Meido. They have died, but they must be good and do only Meido things, or they're going to get in trouble, and they don't want to put their future afterlife at risk. But they have things they want to do down here. They have an agenda, so why not bring a unsuspecting samurai who was messing with their stuff in the living world down to Meido to go run errands for them, and in exchange for being allowed to go home. Good for looters, I suppose.
Yeah.
Find that artifact.
And there's a way of getting and there's a way of being metaphorically close to death, close to the realm of death, as to be close to death itself. So you're almost dead, but not all the way. In a near-death state, you might be able to see and interact with Meido, but still be alive enough that you're able to do it more freely than an actual fully dead person, and even able to get your way back before death becomes final. Something similar to that happens to Akodo Toturi with some help when he is attacked by some shinobi and is nearly but not quite dead. And it is actually a bit unsure whether he was nearly but not quite dead and brought back, or whether he was actually dead and was brought back.
Right. So these are different ways that you might
an actual
end
depiction
up
of
in
that
Meido.
happening. He's in the line, he's in the queue,
to have an adventure
but he does get brought back
in this place.
So that might be something that could happen.
However, Meido is not without risk. We've talked in our other series about how each realm kind of has a jealousy, a thing that it slowly does to your spirit the longer that you are present there. Just remaining in another realm is a risk to you because you are being a Ningendo, you don't belong there. The jealousy of Meido is basically lassitude and despair. You just forget, not even forgetting, you stop caring about where you are or what you're doing. You forget your mission, you procrastinate, you lose your energy or will. Your driving purpose is gone, and then you fall into a patience and willingness to obediently wait in line like everybody else.
Yeah.
You lose hope for coming back, and you're just there. And that's a very intentional thing for Meido, because the point is, they don't want all those spirits wandering around everywhere else. Everybody's supposed to be standing calmly in line waiting to be judged.
No. Yeah. A slightly more kind of intense danger, or acute danger, let's put it that way,
Or just
is
boiled.
angering the Lords of the Dead. Any of them could send you to punishment and torment, which could include being sent to Jigoku, Gakido, or Toshigoku. Although technically that would be, yeah, or I mean, because technically if they send you on to another afterlife because you annoyed them, that's technically them violating their neutrality and their kind of judgment, kind of their role as judges. But there's always the cauldron of consequence if you annoy them. So that might be something you want to avoid. And fundamentally, the
Yes.
the various servitors, the Mazoku,
Right.
could be ordered to beat you up for being annoying. So don't do that, maybe. But that is a definite risk. I mean, especially if you are in Meido
Hey,
without being dead and
off,
not wanting
Mazoku,
to
drinking
go through the normal
tea
procedure,
or
then you
being
could end up
tricked by the
running
Lady of
afoul
Forgetfulness
of the Lords of the Dead
could
in a number of
cause you to
ways.
lose all your memories. So if you drink it, but somehow, your other party members manage to get you out, or you get out after drinking the tea of forgetfulness, you could get out and be yourself, be a samurai and everything, but you could have forgotten all your memories. You could have lost them all because that's what the Lady of Forgetfulness does. Right. Which could be a really fun character to play.
Yes, which is fine if you're going on to another life and you want to start afresh.
Well, you
Not
wouldn't
so
even
good if
remember
you're going
that.
back
You
to your
just
old
are
life.
wandering around like with no memory, and then
And especially if it could be an interesting one. Yeah, I nearly died, and a lot. Yes. So everyone tells me I nearly died, but I don't remember any of it. And the final one we'll mention is that there are invaders to Jigoku. Sorry, I'll start again. And and a final one we're going to mention is there are invaders from other realms, including Jigoku and Gakido and Toshigoku. They are threats you may come across, and there are also going to be,
or they may be
ghosts who
or they may be
aren't
awaiting
happy with
judgment,
the
but they have
idea
something
of
personal
simply
against
awaiting
you.
judgment, and so they may be causing problems. So that's another threat that you may worry. Yes, that is also the thing, that you may have connections with those folk, and they may not be happy with you, and they want to be pleased to see you. And you may have thought, "Well, we obviously dealt with those guys way back when we killed them." It's like, oh, right,
threatening or dangerous
here they
for
are.
Meido.
They still don't seem happy with
are
us for some reason.
a very, very small number of ways of getting out of Meido to end that kind of adventure. The obvious one is if you fulfill a task for MO or one of the Kings of Hell, you could you could get out. They could send you home. They could decide, fine, you don't have to be dead.
Yeah, we've already previously mentioned a few ways out. There's the Chamber of Mirrors, but that's obviously quite difficult. You might be able to do it by climbing the Mountain of Blades, but again, very difficult, very dangerous. So there are a few ways that are out, and then there may be other ways that people haven't
if you're
written down because
brought
they're
there
even
by
more
a spirit
secret.
or shikinja, they should be able to
So there may
return you
be
once you're
difficult,
out.
secret ways to get out
So
without
that's another way.
becoming judged and being reborn. Yeah, you would certainly hope so. You'd certainly hope that have some, if they're going to like haul you in to do something for them, you desperately hope they've got some way of getting you back. Otherwise, it's very rude. And there's another one, like other than the obvious way of getting out of Meido is to go through the whole process, but we're assuming you don't want to do that. But in theory, what might happen is you could be reborn essentially into a new body that is not your own, but you still have your old memories, and it's maybe like an adult body. So maybe you are a spirit now possessing the body of someone else who recently died, but you've got your memories and not their memories. And there is even then the question of who even are you now? That is yet another.
Worth thinking about. I mean, you
that
can
is
all
a thing
end up
you
as a
may
group of
need to think about if you
different people, but you still
somehow
have your
manage to
memories of your
escape
old life.
the afterlife.
It's complicated and fun, but that's what
Yeah.
makes it an adventure. So hopefully, giving you all of this stuff gives you some adventures.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting for your multi-realm tour of the universe. But that's all we have this week. I think that was very long. But yeah, we've done worse, I guess. We are excited about everything coming up.
Yeah.
We will let you know about the news from Gencon and elsewhere as we start to interpret it. And we'll start trying to, and we'll also, as other websites like Last Province starts to ramp up as they interpret the news, we'll point to them. But nobody, I think, has yet had a chance to respond to this yet.
No. But soon. New content. Yeah. We'd like to call out our sister podcasts and Patreons. So our official affiliated actual play podcast, Fortune and Strife, is ongoing. And is a great listen. And what's happening at the moment?
We are bracing up for a battle between the forces of the Caliph, who we are fleeing from, and the Unicorn Caravan, who has taken us in and are helping us try and get back to Rokugan from the Burning Sands.
Ooh, there's lots of stuff going on. And I believe you're also going to be doing or have done an Adventures of Rokugan.
Yes.
Kind of side
we
quest.
have an Adventures in Rokugan side quest that we are airing the episodes for as we get ready for this mass battle that will end season 2.
Yeah. So lots of stuff to listen to there. And we would be remiss if we didn't mention our friends at D20 Radio, who are a large collection of role-playing game podcasts. So if there's anything you're interested in the realm of role-playing games, then head over to D20 Radio.
Yes. Our content is funded by, as we said, the Community Discord Patreon, which has supported our editing and hosting costs and our website and all of that material. And even though things have been hard, we'll keep trying to give you the best content and research we can. And though we totally understand and don't expect people to donate, we are extremely grateful for those who have, and everything our patrons have continued to provide.
Online, you can find us at our website, courtgamespod.com. On Twitter, we are twitter.com/courtgamespod.
At least as long as it's Twitter.
And if you do wish, as long as it's Twitter, yeah. And if you do want to support us, and we'd be very grateful if you were to do that, you can find us at Patreon at patreon.com/courtgames.
But that is it for us this week. This is Kikita Kaori. May the fortunes favor you.
And I have been Korvar. And until we meet again, keep your jade handy.
Thank you.